Welcome back to InboundID sharing session with me, Giovanni Naura. On this 27th episode, we will discuss about being an expat in Indonesian agency, and this could be quite interesting. So, who will be more fitting to share the experience of being an expat in Indonesian agency than our own business development manager, Matthew Bott. So, digital marketers, if you are watching this live on Facebook and want to ask any question related to the topic, post it on the comment section and Matt will answer all the questions during our Q&A session. So, okay, without further ado, let's welcome our business development manager, Matthew Bott. Please come. Thank you for making time to sit here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Very excited. Hope this is very interesting for everyone, and you can learn a little bit more about me and my life in Indonesia.
Yeah, so Matt, there's a little we know about you, unless that you're originally from England, right? And could you tell us a bit about the journey that lets you end up in Indonesia and finally become a part of InboundID?
Yeah, I mean it's quite a convoluted, complicated journey from England. So basically, I grew up here in Manchester, a small town called Oldham, which is north-east Manchester. Very countryside, lots of farms, lots of mountains and hills. So I'm not really a city boy. You know, I'm not used to the city like Jakarta. So I went to Lancaster University in 2009 to 2012. After that, I got a job in Manchester. Working in Manchester, and then I had a lot of friends that had either been from Indonesia or had travelled to Indonesia after university. So I came on holiday to visit them. Went to Bali, did all the typical Malay things, you know, in Bali. Went back to the UK, and I was just sat at my computer one day, saw some jobs for Indonesia. I applied after a few Skype interviews. I eventually kind of got accepted, came over here in about August, September 2013. Yeah, so almost 4 years ago. And yeah, I've been working in agencies pretty much since then.
So it was your first choice. It was your choice in the first place to go to Indonesia for work.
It wasn't really a choice. It was kind of luck, really. Like I applied for a few jobs, but I wasn't really too hopeful. You know, I was like, yeah, if it happens, it happens. You know, I was quite happy in the UK, a little bit bored, kind of just the greyness of the UK sometimes. It's a little bit rainy, a little bit cold. So I just thought, yeah, let's just apply. And then luckily I found a company that would bring me out over here.
So when you first came to Indonesia and started to work here, there must be some culture shocks, right? We are always curious about what expats or foreigners find the most shocking about our lifestyle or working culture. So what was it for you personally, or maybe your friends have told you about working in Indonesia, and how do you deal with that?
I think the first thing that struck me was Indonesia is not really. It's a very, very big country. I didn't realize how big it was. And you hear about Bali, you hear about Jakarta, you hear about, you know, the island of Java, things like that. But when you're in the UK, you never really think of them as being in the same country. A lot of people in the UK think Bali is its own country. So you're kind of like, wait, it's got this place and this place and this place. And another thing was every single place in Indonesia has its own culture, its own foods, you know, its own languages, its own religions. So that was really interesting. And you know, if you're in Manchester and you drive to somewhere, say Newcastle, it looks exactly the same. You know, there's no difference. But in Indonesia, if you drive from Jakarta to Bandung or Jakarta, yeah, it's very, very different. Another thing was just the amount of people. I've never seen, especially Jakarta, a place with so many people, so many cars, so many motorbikes, and traffic is just something that I've never experienced in my life. You know, when I was in the UK, I used to drive from the head office of my company in the UK, was in London, and I worked in the Manchester office. So every few weeks or every other week, I'd drive down to London, and it'd take me 5 hours. But that's like double the length of journey from Jakarta to Bandung, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I actually Googled it yesterday. I used to drive down to Birmingham sometimes from Manchester. It'd take me an hour and a half, and it's pretty much the same distance from Jakarta to Bandung as Manchester to Birmingham. And it only takes 1.5 hours.
Yeah, but if you're going to Jakarta from Bandung, it's gonna
Yeah,
take like 5
I
until
think
9
it took me
hours.
27 hours once.
So I heard you've worked in UK before coming to Indonesia. From what you have experienced, what is the biggest difference of the work culture or environment in Indonesia and other countries?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of work culture, it's not massively dissimilar. You know, there are a lot of similarities. I think some of the bigger issues are British people tend to think of work is only work. You know, you go at 9 o'clock, you finish at 5 o'clock, and that's it. You don't think about it. You sometimes socialize maybe at Christmas with your work colleagues, but apart from that, it's not really a big deal. It's basically your work that's it. It's just to earn money and to kind of do your job, and then you have a whole other life outside of work. In Indonesia, they kind of prefer their social gatherings, trips away, which is something that I really enjoy, especially when we went to Lembang as a kid. I had really good time, so I think that's the difference. You know, Indonesian kind of companies expect you to be a little bit more social at your work, kind of thing. Another thing is just meetings. I find that Indonesian companies, they just love their meetings. You know, if they can have a meeting about it, they'll do it. Where in England, it's very much, you know, if you can send an email, just send me an email. I don't want to have to, you know, meet for 1 hour and do it. Other than that, it's very, very similar. Speed is one issue. You know, I do find sometimes in Indonesia, it's just because Indonesian people just seem a lot more relaxed. Sometimes it can take a little bit longer to kind of get the work done, but as long as the deadlines are met, I don't really care.
But you're having a good time working here, right?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
With this kind of working culture.
Yeah, no, I like it.
So, other than language barriers, what do you find the most frustrating and challenging about working in Indonesia agencies as an expert?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the language is a big thing. Bahasa Indonesia is a very strange language to me. You know, there's three. What I see is like three kind of languages. You've got your very slang, you know, I'm not even going to try and do it. Because I just make a fool out of myself. So you're very slang, which is what you hear the kids on the street talking. You're kind of middle, which is when you're a bit more grown up and you speak to your friends with. And then you're very formal business thing. So I can understand it quite well, especially the middle one, you know, like not too formal but not too slang. The slang one, I have no idea what they're saying at all. Because the difference between the slang in Indonesian and the slang in English is the slang in English, you can understand how it became that word, you know what I mean? Where in Indonesian, you just hear some, like I heard one the other day about when you're too hot and it's like, something like that. I don't know, and I'm like, how does it go from, you know, being that to that? And then with the formal one, I have no idea, because there's just so many prepositions, things before the word, things behind the word. And I can speak Indonesian okay if people are, you know, they're speaking slowly. Because my issue is I can understand it, but I come to say the words, and I spend so long building the sentence in my head that when I come to actually say my sentence in Indonesian, kind of the conversation's already gone. So yeah, it would make no more sense to the conversation. In terms of other challenges, there's not, about working in an Indonesian agency, there's not too many kind of frustrating moments. You know, obviously, like I said, if you're trying to work in business development, trying to go and see prospective clients, you know, maximum 2 a day. You know, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. Where in England, you know, you can just travel around the city quite easily. So yeah, it's just kind of time management is a lot more difficult here. You know, making sure that you leave for your meetings with enough time to get to the office. And you know, it does mess up your day, you know, because you're having to spend 3 if not 4 hours a day out of the office just for one meeting. And you just feel like you can't get anything done. You can never kind of catch up with all the work you've got to do because you're out of the office for so long.
How do you deal with it?
How do I deal with it? I don't know, I mean, it's just time management. Just kind of putting some time aside or a day aside a week where I say, okay, I'm not available to go to the office today. This day is just for proposal making, or it's just for, you know, catching up with clients, prospective clients. And yeah, just making sure that I've got the time to finish everything.
Okay, next question. So you've been working in digital marketing field for quite some time now. From your personal observations, what could be the strengths and weaknesses of Indonesian agencies to compete in international digital marketing field?
Yeah, I actually think this is quite an interesting question. So basically, a few years ago, you know, Indonesia was, in terms of digital, you know, quite a way further behind than, you know, Europe and the US, which is mainly just due to things like infrastructure issues. People didn't trust the banks, credit cards, and basically what we're finding now is a lot of startups are actually, they've understood that there's these issues in Indonesia, and they're creating solutions to them. You know, there's a lot of startups that are creating, you know, the safe payment wallets and things like that, which you don't get in the UK. So I think what's actually very interesting is how Indonesia's basically leapfrogged kind of up to the level of the UK, but in a different way. They went on their own journey to get to the same place. You know, they understand that there was these issues, but they had to go their own way. And also, I think now with such a big population in Indonesia, you know, everyone's got a smartphone. Kind of they're embracing all this new technology. I'm really excited to see like them testing things like IoT, so Internet of Things, AI, and you know how you can use VR, things like that for digital marketing. There's another thing that I read actually they're trying to do in Indonesia, which is how you take an online campaign and track it against online sales, for example, in a shop. I know they've trialed it in Japan. I heard they're trying to do it in Indonesia, just test it out. And, you know, I think it's the perfect place for all the smartphones and such a massive population can get some really good research done. So yeah, hopefully kind of Indonesia embraces the technology, which I think we all need to do, even as an agency. You know, we have certain services that we offer, you know, your SEO, but I think we also need to look at actually how do we implement new technologies and new innovations into our services.
Do you think it's going to work in a short time, or it's going to work?
I mean, it's not going to be a short time, but the thing about technology and innovation is it's a never-ending journey, right? So, you know, you can't say, okay, we're using VR now, or using AI. That's the end of it, we've done it, we're going to use it. It's, okay, we've got a certain part of the technology, now we need to work on actually improving that until we've got, you know, a great system.
Cool. So throughout these years, from the first time you started working in Indonesia until now, do you feel any changes on how the society or the local employees of a company or agency's behavior or acceptance towards expats in their team?
I mean, for me, it's a little bit difficult to answer the question. I've only been here for 3-4 years, so I've not really seen what it was like, let's say. I've not really seen it on a timeline for about 10 years. But what I have noticed is, you know, expats now, the new expats are a lot different from the old expats. I'm new. I'm only 25. So, the new expats, the old expats are these so-called kind of experts that came in for a year or two, very kind of saw themselves very senior. You know, they have their own office, they don't want to be bothered by anyone. Whereas the new expats, they've grown up in kind of a socially connected world, speaking to people around the world, understanding challenges in those countries. You know, they travel a lot on their own, So a lot of them actually kind of ended up in Indonesia and then had to find a job rather than just being sent from their companies. And if that's the case, they're kind of a lot more accepting to the cultures and they want to be more involved in the kind of the office culture, but they're not as kind of hierarchical as the older expats that I find.
For you personally, how are you feeling from the first time? From the first time you were being here in Indonesia and now?
In 4 years, I mean, it's not changed massively. But you can see, you know, if you go somewhere like Kemang, you can see the difference between the older expats that have, you know, they're here for a few years and they think they're, you know, these knees, they're great. And they are, you know, they're very educated, but they also have these massive salaries and they think they're the best of the best of the best. Whereas the newer expats, they're more accepting that, you know, Indonesia now has improved the education system a lot. You know, there's a lot of Indonesians that can actually do a lot of the jobs that expats used to do. So they're kind of more accepting of getting help from the Indonesian colleagues and things like that, which is something I think for an Indonesian company with expats, obviously you need them both to come together and work together, rather than having a group of expats and a group of Indonesian staff.
Alright, cool. Okay, so before we move to the audience, do you have any tips for fellow expats on how to survive in Indonesia agencies or just Indonesian work culture in general?
In terms of surviving, obviously try and learn a bit of the language, even if it's just the basics. I find that Indonesian people kind of appreciate it a lot, even if it's a terima kasih every now and again kind of thing. So try and learn a bit of the language. You don't need to be fluent in it. The Indonesian, kind of especially Jakarta digital community is quite small, quite compact, and it's quite a small, like a closed group. So you really need connections to get into that group. So, you know, meet people, go to the networking events. You know, a lot of the people in the digital marketing community speak English. You know, there's a lot of people that have, you know, traveled to Singapore, working in Singapore and the US and things like that. So yeah, don't be afraid to go to these networking events, meet people, and try and find a house close to your office. Yeah, you don't have to sit in traffic.
Is it a real big deal for you to work closely from
I mean, it's strange. So in the UK, I could sit in a car for an hour and a half going to somewhere, and it's fine because I realise, okay, I've travelled 90 kilometres. It's no problem. You know, it's going to take that long. But when you travel for 90 minutes and you travel 5 kilometres,
it's really annoying, right?
It's like you don't mind spending the time. It's just how little distance you do that frustrates you. So yeah, just find somewhere kind of around the same area.
Alright, now we are going to give our fellow InboundID Army in the studio who might have been curious about Matt's experience on being an expat in Indonesia agency. So the chance to ask more questions about it. So anyone have questions for Matt?
No questions?
Hi Matt. Just want to ask, there are a lot of graduates nowadays and maybe they were like wanting to look for a job like outside Indonesia.
Okay.
Can you please give them some advice on how to look for a job in other countries and advice for them?
Yeah. So actually for Indonesians to find a job outside of firstly, if it's an an English-speaking country, you'll have to do something like IELTS or was it TOEFL, I think it's called, to prove you have a good English level. And then what I would say then is trying to make connections, looking at companies that have an office in Indonesia and maybe having the opportunity to be transferred to, Europe or something is an idea. I mean, the way I did it to actually come to Indonesia was literally just through LinkedIn. I just applied for a few jobs, messaged a few people. I think the big mistake a lot of people make is they apply for these jobs on LinkedIn. It shows, 700 people who applied for this job, but they don't message the person about it, so they're just another CV. the curriculum vitae. So what they need to do is actually, follow up to make themselves memorable. So yeah, make sure you got the IELTS and just start connecting with people that you think fit your. They don't have to be working in the company you want to work for, but they kind of are in that industry. They might be a thought leader in that industry, and they'll have connections to companies and people that you can work from. And you'll be surprised how helpful people are as well. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Hello, Matt.
Hey.
My name is Bilal. I want to ask a question on what is the advantage and disadvantage of being an expat
Okay.
in career-wise?
Career-wise,
Yes. And the second question maybe, what made you decide to choose a career in internet marketing agency? I mean, as far as I know, a lot of expats in Indonesia just career in the main industry, gas, financial services, something like that.
Yeah, sure. So advantages and disadvantages to working in Jakarta. For being an expat, I think first disadvantage being a British person is there's nowhere to get good English food. I can't get a good fish and chips or a good roast dinner or anything like that, which is really annoying. Advantage, it's quite funny actually, Ido's not here at the minute, but whenever I go to a meeting, they always think I'm the CEO. So they're like, oh, so you own the company? I'm like, no, I'm just the BD manager. And other advantages, I mean, yeah, people sometimes do think you're a little bit more of an expert than you are. I always find. Even though I like to think I know what I'm doing, but sometimes they expect you to be this amazing kind of know-it-all, And then disadvantages, I would say, the expats in Indonesia, some of them are very kind of, they expect you to want to be in their little expat club. They expect you to want to be really good friends with them. And that's not really my thing. Pretty much most of my friends are Indonesian. And I don't really kind of want to hang out with expats all the time. A lot of the expats kind of expect you to do that. Yeah, it's not really my thing. And in terms of why I kind of joined digital marketing companies, I just see it as kind of the future of kind of working in technology, learning about innovation, about different ways you can kind of connect with people. Oil and gas is great, but it's not going to be around forever. Whereas things like digital, it's going to change. There's going to be new innovations, new inventions, but there's always going to be an industry of connecting with consumers and buyers through digital methods. And so I just kind of feel like it's kind of the industry to be in right now.
What is your major when you're learning in university?
No, my major was geography. Geography?
Geography?
Yeah. Learning about
Just about
the lands.
line. I mean, like
Yeah, I know. It's so basically I kind of studied it, but after that I didn't really focus on it at all. I just kind of taught myself. I did courses to learn about digital marketing, and a lot of the skills that I picked up at university I can use for business development. Giving presentations, giving speeches, creating proposals, things like that. So a lot of the skills I learned, I use now, but not necessarily the subject.
Can you tell us about how does it feel to be the only expat in your life?
At first, it was pretty intimidating. You know, I worked at companies in Indonesia, but there was always another expat or another few expats there, and you know, they kind of knew about what I would be thinking. You know what I mean? So obviously, my way of thinking and your way of thinking is sometimes quite different. What I find, you know, funny is probably not funny to you guys, or you know, what I find acceptable might not be acceptable. So yeah, they kind of knew the way my mind worked. So here it's a little bit different. And at first I was a little bit taken aback. You know, I wasn't sure if I knew enough about kind of the work culture of an Indonesian company to fit in well. But you know, there's a lot of great people here that I've met and made friends with. So yeah, I kind of, it's not too much of an issue now. You know, I enjoy it. So at first it was an issue, not an issue, but something that I was worried about, whether I would be able to fit in properly. But now it's fine.
So you already find your friends here?
Oh yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Matt. So I think we have to close this sharing session. But before we close to this episode, I have one last question for you. So, you've worked in different agencies in Indonesia. Would you mention the best things about being an expat in Indonesia?
About being an expat, I mean, it doesn't really relate to being an expat necessarily. I really find that kind of the Indonesian culture, you know, the relaxed, kind of chilled out, kind of working at your own pace culture kind of suits me. You know, it's in England, people are very kind of uptight, very reserved. They don't show their emotions, so I kind of prefer the Indonesian way. And you know, I love living in Indonesia. Jakarta's a different story, but I love traveling around Indonesia, seeing all the different places. So yeah, just being able to go 2 hours, 3 hours in a car and be in somewhere with a complete different culture, different language, is something that I really enjoy.
Okay, so thank you so much, Matt, for joining with us today.
Thank you.
Anything?
Just thank you for everyone for listening today, and if anyone's watching on the live feed, thank you for watching, and I hope you found it interesting.
We can learn more about you.
Yeah.
Okay, so also thank you for InboundID Army and digital marketers who joined today's study session. Please give a big round of applause for Okay, so in case you missed today's session, worry not, because the video will be uploaded to our YouTube channel next week. So make sure you subscribe and turn on the notifications so you'll be the first to watch our newest video. And don't forget to follow our Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram to get the latest update about inbound marketing and to know the guest star for the next sharing session. So digital marketers, see you in InboundID sharing session next week, broadcasted live every Wednesday at 4 p.m. on Facebook fan page in InboundID. Thank you so much. Good afternoon.